Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are talking about the consolidation and maintenance of power, impacts of foreign policy. So in this video we're going to talk about just how Mao manipulated the Cold War and how he manipulated China's place within the Cold War to increase his power at home, increase his charismatic leadership, his propaganda, everything. So just as a refresher, consolidation is the action or process of combining several things into a single, more effective or coherent whole. Maintenance is the process of maintaining or preserving something. So both of these things, we're talking about power, reducing all the power so he has it, and then maintenance is maintaining, holding on to all that power as much as possible. Now for foreign policy, this is objectives and activities in relations to interactions with other states, unions, and political entities, whether bilaterally or throughout multilateral platforms, right? And the reason why bilateral and multilateral are important right now is because bilateral is going to be between two states, multilateral is going to be multiple states. So because this is the Cold War, we're going to talk about some bilateral foreign policy and then some multilateral foreign policy. So let's dig in. The four examples that we're going to be going over in this video is the Sino-Soviet Treaty, the Sino-Soviet Split, the the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Mao's relationship with the United States. The first two and last example are all bilateral. Mao interacting with another country. The Cuban Missile Crisis is multilateral. There are multiple assets to this that are key to Mao's success as a leader. Now, Sino. We've talked about this before, but Sino, S-I-N-O, when you see that right there, that's another way of saying China. So you can say Chinese-Soviet Treaty or Sino-Soviet Treaty, whichever you prefer. So, what is the Sino-Soviet Treaty? Well, it starts in 1950. It's between Mao and Stalin, the Russian hero of World War II. Essentially, now that there is a second communist country in the world that rivals the Soviet Union decides, hey, let's be friends. Let's work together and be a unified force. Under three conditions. One, you have to join the Korean War. If you do not support the North Koreans in their conflict with the United States, then we will not make an agreement with each other. Two, that the $300 million that we gave you was a loan. It's not a gift. You have to pay that back to us. So we gave you money to help your war, but it wasn't a gift. It was, you owe us the money. And the third was, you need to take care of and house, feed, and pay 10,000 Soviet employees who are going to help you become a great nation. So even though this is a treaty, ultimately, Stalin is doing what he does with Stalinism and saying, we were the first communist country, China. You owe us everything. So you're going to do what I say when I say it. This provides a perfect opportunity for Mao to take this treaty and turn to his people and say, hey, look what the only other ally we have in the world is doing to us. Look at what the Soviet Union is doing. Right now, we're going to have to deal with this. But this is what we need to fight against when we become a stronger nation. This should serve as evidence for China to get stronger. And it was very effective, right? Although this was a horrible treaty that the country could sign, it was incredibly effective as a motivational force to get the Chinese populations to say and do whatever Mao said. Because Mao has stuck to his word every single time. He gave women's rights, he redistributed property, he killed off the landlords, he has done everything right. There's no reason why we shouldn't doubt him now. And thus, over the next 9 years, the relationship between China and the Soviet Union is going to get progressively worse because China is doing everything it can to break away from the Soviet Union and break away from this treaty. Which is why we get the Sino-Soviet Split. The Sino-Soviet Split takes course over 3 years. In those 3 years, from 59 to 62, Mao's relationship with the Soviet Union comes to a really harsh point. At the end of the Great Leap Forward, the Soviet Union heavily criticizes Mao, heavily criticizes China. And this is an attack not on Mao, but on the country. This is an attack on everyone. That this large nation is criticizing us rather than helping us. So why should we continue to be friends with them? And in an attempt to show their disdain and in an attempt to show how angry they were with the Soviet Union, in 1961, the Chinese delegates, the Chinese ambassadors, leave. They leave in the middle of a meeting with the Soviet Union. And them leaving really upsets the Soviet Union. So much so that the leader of the Soviet Union outright insults Mao. Outright says that Mao is a useless, ineffective leader and nothing but a living corpse. To which Mao takes all of that, publicizes it, spreads it everywhere he can, not only in China but internationally, and says, look how terrible the Soviet Union is. Look how horrible they are to their friends. The leader is nothing but a redundant old boot. He is nothing more than that. So, at the response of that, the Soviet Union tries to do the exact same thing Mao does and says, look at how horrible China is, but they're a little too late to the game. And so, from this, in 1962, Mao completely breaks away from the Soviet Union. Mao says, you know what? The Soviet Union is trash. It is garbage. They are not the leaders of the communist country. We are. But Mao had to wait for the right moment to announce his split from the Soviet Union. Because Mao knew, that eventually the Soviet Union was going to mess up. And did they mess up in a big way? This is where we get to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, as we can remember, the Cuban Missile Crisis is where the U.S. and the Soviet Union got the closest they possibly could to nuclear war. Where if two things went wrong, nuclear bombs would have flown across the continents. The world would be plunged into nuclear war. The Cuban Missile Crisis is by far the worst nuclear-related event in history. Because this right here, truly, if one or two things went differently in life, we would not exist right now. The United States would be a nuclear wasteland, and so would Russia, and so would Europe, and so would most of the Middle East, and so would most of South America, Central America, and Asia. We would have definitely bombed Korea. Now, in 1962, because of how terrible and how close we got to a nuclear war, every country turned to the United States, turned to the Soviet Union and said, how dare you? How dare you almost kill us all over a stupid ideological conflict? And the United States was like, yeah, we shouldn't have done this. This was a really bad on our part. We really screwed up. And the Soviet Union was like, yeah, this got a little too real. We're going to back down. And so at this point in 1962, everyone in the world was essentially, except for Britain, Poland, and Eastern Germany, was criticizing the United States and the Soviet Union. And when I say everyone, I say China as well. See, Mao found his opportunity. It came, he saw it, and he took it. So at the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, he announced that he will be splitting from the Soviet Union. He will not only be splitting from the Soviet Union, but he criticizes them all up and down the world, the global stage. He goes to the UN and starts arguing about how the Soviet Union is a country that needs to be invaded, that needs to be taken down, that they are not the true leaders of communism. Look at all the things that they're doing. Mao goes to Cuba and says, look, the Soviet Union abandoned you. Join me, join us, and I got you. I will never back down to the United States like the Soviet Union did. Mao tells Mao tells the United States, if you mess around with us like you did with the Soviet Union, we won't stop. We will launch. And when he said that, Mao kind of exposed something. And up until this point, Mao didn't have nuclear weapons. Not entirely. Until 1962, the end of 1962. He came up and his nuclear program produced its first nuclear weapon called the 59-6. And it's called the 59-6 because that was the year that the Soviet Union decided to openly criticize Mao, calling him a living corpse. Mao named the first nuclear bomb, which is which is this picture that only exists of it, after the insult the Soviet Union told him. This was huge. Everyone in China loved this, and it made Mao as high as he possibly could be. He could do no wrong. Which is why, when Mao starts talking with the United States, it goes through a series of complicated back and forwards. Between 1950 and 1970, everything is all about death to the United States. Death to any country who tries to stand out against us. Death to the imperialist, aggressive nation. We need to eliminate them and keep them away. Which is why, between 1950 and 1970, every policy that Mao made, every conversation Mao had regarding the United States was one of anger, hatred, and aggression. So much so that a lot of what Mao's propaganda was focused on was this, as you can see here on the screen. Was this, we need to fight to kill the US. Look what they're doing in Korea. Look what they're doing in Vietnam. Look what they're doing in Cuba. Look what they're doing across the world. But in 1970, something changes. In 1970, Mao realizes the Cold War isn't going to end anytime soon. The Cold War is going to keep going, and he doesn't know for how long. So he decides to change tactics. He decides that, the only way to really defeat the United States, the only way to really have a victory over them is let's start making trades. Let's start working with them. Because the more we work with them, the less the Soviet Union will. And then once the Soviet Union's gone, all we got to do is destroy the United States and we are the world dominating power. So Mao slowly starts manipulating the United States and forcing the United States to start meeting with him and having discussions. And the United States is like, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to destroy the USSR and make a very strong ally. The communication and the alliance between Mao and the United States between 1970 and 1976 fluctuates up and down constantly. And it isn't until after Mao's death in 76 when things between the US and China get on the road to where the relations are today.